Welcome to IRC's e-learning module on how to give feedback, brought to you by IRC's Remote Management Capacity Building Project in the Syria Response Region. This module uses a combination of a lecture, visuals, video, and interactive exercises to strengthen your ability to deliver effective feedback. You can complete this module using your smartphone or computer. Let's begin by looking at what you'll learn in this module. Together, we will explore 6 questions. What is the purpose of giving feedback? When should you provide feedback? How do you prepare for a feedback conversation? How do you get people to act upon your feedback? How do you address third-party feedback? And how can you reduce the possibility that feedback will lead to a conflict? It's important to acknowledge that there is a tremendous amount of information and many tools to help you give effective feedback. In this module, we will focus on a few practical tools and strategies that managers at IRC have said are most useful for them. And importantly, these tools and strategies are useful for remote management as well as in-person management. We begin by looking at 4 critical points about feedback. First, the purpose of feedback is to encourage effective behavior. Feedback is one of the best tools you have to develop the capacity of your staff, which leads me to my second point. Feedback should recognize good performance or correct poor performance. Often, when people think about feedback, they immediately think about critical feedback. And part of the reason for this is that often managers focus too much on giving critical feedback and fail to recognize good performance. Effective managers know that it is as important to give positive feedback as it is to give critical feedback. Next, feedback should be part of regular, ongoing conversations between you and a direct report to discuss how that person is performing. When feedback is something you do often, and when you make an effort to give positive feedback and critical feedback regularly, people begin to expect feedback as a normal part of their interaction with you. Feedback becomes less anxiety-producing for you and for the recipient. In addition, making feedback a regular part of your interactions ensures that you address problems when they arise, or provide positive reinforcement when people do something good, and it demonstrates that you are investing in your staff's growth and development. And finally, feedback should always be tied to objective performance standards. These standards should come from conversations you've had with your staff about their roles and responsibilities, their job description, and the IRC values and code of conduct.
I give my team members a lot of praise for the good work that they do, and I know it helps them feel motivated and appreciated. And I also know that giving praise isn't the same as giving positive feedback. When I praise or compliment a team member, I say things like, "Great job, I really appreciate your hard work." And I know this makes people feel good. But when I give a positive feedback, I'm having much more detailed conversation about specifically what someone did well and the impact of what they did. I go beyond praise and give positive feedback when a team member does something new for the first time, like a new task, project, or behavior, exceeds expectations, succeeds at a challenging or risky task, and invests extra efforts to achieve results. For example, last week, one of my team members was helping me put together a grant proposal. We had a huge amount of data to include in the proposal, and my team member took the initiative to organize the data into a really helpful Excel spreadsheet so that we could easily select the most useful data. I know it took her more time and effort to do this, and I made sure to tell her that doing this really helped improve the quality of the grant and our chances of getting it.
Giving critical feedback can be hard, but I know I need to do it when a team member repeatedly makes the same mistake. is not changing a behavior we already discussed, is not meeting his or her performance goals, or behaves in a way that negatively impacts others, such as team members, beneficiaries, or partners. For example, one of my team members is constantly checking his phone and texting during meetings. Someone will be talking, and when I look at this team member, he is always looking at his phone. In fact, the other day, someone was asking him a question and he didn't even hear it because he was so focused on his phone. I find this frustrating, and I know his team members feel he's disrespecting their time. I even started to see a few people imitate his behavior. This is definitely one of those situations where I have to give critical feedback.
We're going to look at a simple, effective tool you can use to prepare to give feedback. The tool I'm referring to is called the SBI feedback model, which stands for Situation, Behavior, Impact. Let's take a look at each of the three parts of this model. When we say situation, what you're doing here is describing when and where the behavior occurred. Behavior describes specifically what did the person say or do. And impact looks at how the behavior affects you or others. Situation, behavior, impact. A simple three-part model to help you prepare what you're going to say when you give feedback. Let's look at two feedback statements that use the SBI model. Take a minute to read the positive feedback example and see if you can identify the situation, behavior, and impact. Then I'll say a bit more. The situation, when and where did the behavior occur, can be found in the first sentence where it says, in the email and yesterday. In the email is where and yesterday is when. The behavior, specifically what did the person say or do, is also found in the first sentence where it says, you presented the reasons for our extension request using helpful supporting data, and all the documents you attached were error-free. Notice that this is an objective description of what the person did. It's based on observation and fact, not personal opinion. The impact, how the person's behavior impacted you or others, is in the last sentence where it says, your email will help the donor understand our perspective, and it will help us have a quality conversation with her tomorrow. It's important to notice that this impact statement explains the specific effect the person's behavior will have on the donor, and in this case, on the team. The more specific and fact-based your impact statement is, the stronger it will be. Now take a minute to read the critical feedback example and see if you can identify the situation, behavior, and impact. Then I'll say a bit more. The situation, when and where did the behavior occur, can be found in the first sentence, where it says, during last week's all-staff call. The behavior, specifically what did the person say or do, is also found in the first sentence, where it says, you interrupted me 3 times to ask questions that had already been answered. The impact, how the person's behavior impacted you or others, is in the last sentence, where it reads, "I felt frustrated by your interruptions and was unable to get through all the items on the agenda, which means the team did not receive the information they needed. In addition, by asking questions that had already been answered, you showed me that you were not listening." When you objectively describe behavior, you say exactly what you saw someone do, heard someone say, or read in an email or a text. You avoid using judgmental words and personal opinions. Objectively describing behavior may sound simple, so you're going to do an activity that gives you the chance to practice this skill. Managers who are able to describe behavior without using judgments or personal opinions have the most success when delivering feedback. And later in this module, we'll discuss how to objectively describe behaviors even when you're managing people remotely.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for coming on time. I hope you had a very nice long weekend. We have a lot to discuss on our agenda, so let's get started. We're gonna start with talking about timesheets. Okay.
Hey, Harvey, I'm sorry, really, I'm sorry. Yes, I forget that we have meeting. No, I'm sorry.
Okay. So, basically, as I was discussing, we're going to be talking about timesheets. So, when we talk about timesheets, I want to emphasize on that you guys need to submit them on time. You need to fill in them. You fill them correctly with the right information, correct codes, and after all that, you need to get it signed from your supervisors, and then get it signed by HR and submit it to HR. That's the most important thing. If you have any questions, anything, please feel free.
I just had one question about one section of the timesheet.
I don't know how to fill your timesheet. It's so easy.
Never mind, it's okay.
No, I mean, if you
No,
have
no.
any question, we can discuss it
No,
here.
no,
don't
no,
worry.
it's okay. It's
Are
okay.
you sure?
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Let's look at the correct answers. All of the items with a check mark are observable behaviors, things the man said or did. The other items on the list are not behaviors, they're judgments. For example, annoying is not something the man said or did. It's your judgment of how he is acting. The same is true of disrespectful. This is not a behavior. It's how you feel about the way he's acting. You may judge his behavior to be disrespectful, but others could interpret his actions differently. Inappropriate, bad employee, funny, rude, inconsiderate, insincere, those words are all judgment words. To ensure that this difference between behavior and judgment is clear, you'll watch the video again, and this time the behaviors will be highlighted.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for coming on time. I hope you had a very nice long weekend. We have a lot to discuss on our agenda, so let's get started. We're going to start with talking about timesheets. Okay.
Hey, Harvey, I'm sorry, really, I'm sorry. Yes, I forget that we have meeting. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, so basically, as I was discussing, we're going to be talking about timesheets. So when we talk about timesheets, I want to emphasize on that you guys need to submit them on time. You need to fill in them. You fill them correctly with the right information, correct codes, and after all that, you need to get it signed from your supervisors, and then get it signed by HR and submit it to HR. That's the most important thing. If you have any questions, anything, please feel free.
Yeah, I just had one question about one section of the timesheet.
I don't know how to fill your timesheet. It's so easy.
Never mind, it's okay.
No, I mean, if you
No,
have
no.
any question, we can discuss it
No,
here.
no,
don't
no,
worry.
it's okay. It's
Are you
okay.
sure?
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I want to share 2 more examples to further illustrate the difference between behavior and judgment. I'm going to share a judgment, and then I'm going to show you what it would sound like to actually describe the behavior associated with that judgment. Here's the first judgment. You are unreliable and do not communicate well. Some of the behaviors that could lead to a statement like that are, you missed the deadline for the report and did not tell me you needed more time to finish it. Think about how you'd feel if someone accused you of being unreliable and not communicating well. Now think how you'd feel if someone told you you'd missed the deadline and didn't tell your supervisor you needed more time to finish. You may feel uncomfortable in both situations, but if you feel judged, you are much more likely to get defensive and shut down compared to having a conversation based on facts. Now let's look at the second example, this one using a more positive situation. Here's the judgment. You are good at working with beneficiaries. This may be nice to say and even nicer to hear, but it's still a judgment. If instead you say, you take time to listen to beneficiaries and summarize what you hear to make sure you understand their needs, you are pointing out the positive behaviors that make this person effective. You are also demonstrating a level of attention and commitment to your staff when you describe a positive behavior using this level of detail. A good manager will tell a staff member he is good at his job. A great manager will describe the behaviors that make that staff member good at his job. So remember, when people feel judged, they get defensive, and it's almost impossible for them to accept your feedback. This means that using judgments when giving feedback is counterproductive to the whole process. Come on.
Hey, how are
Hey,
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, I'm good. Okay, so let's get started. What items do you have for our agenda this week? Hey, hello? Did I lose you?
No. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm here and I can hear you fine. The connection is good.
Okay, so good. So what items do you have for our agenda this week?
I don't have anything specific, honestly, but everything is okay, yeah.
Okay, so I have a few things. Last week we agreed that you would give me an update on how you're doing with putting together the data for the quarterly reports. So those are due next week. So tell me, what progress have you made on those?
Everything is okay, yeah. I don't have any question or anything about that.
Okay, so you're on track? Everything is good? You're
Yeah,
ready to meet next
no.
week's deadline?
Yeah, no. Everything is okay, don't worry.
Okay, so the second thing we agreed to discuss was your case notes. Yeah, so we talked about you telling me where you are. So what progress have you made on those?
Okay, yeah. Just I have made a little progress. I didn't count the number of cases I did this week, but definitely I did better than last week.
Okay, we agreed last week that you would count up the number of cases, yeah? And you would report back exactly how many cases you had so that I knew the progress.
I know, I'm sorry, really I'm sorry for that. I just been so busy, but I promise to have this information next week. We will talk. I know you need it. Sorry for that.
Okay. All right, so those were the two things that I had to discuss. Did you have anything else?
I do have one question.
Okay.
Are the quarterly reports still due next week?
Seriously?
Option C is the best feedback statement. Let's take a look at why. When you're trying to figure out which statement is the best, you should have been thinking about the SBI model: situation, behavior, impact. Option C has all three parts of the model. The situation is yesterday, during our weekly supervision call. The behaviors are: you joined the call late, didn't come prepared, typed throughout our conversation, and asked questions that I had already answered several times. There are 4 specific behaviors, and they're all described using objective, non-judgmental language. And the impact statement is: what you did made me feel frustrated because I felt you were wasting my time, and it made me question whether I can rely on you to complete your tasks on time. This impact statement clearly describes how the person's behavior affected the manager, and it also uses objective, non-judgmental language. Option A has the situation and the impact, but not the behaviors. The sentence that reads, "You were inconsiderate and disrespectful," is not a description of behavior. Inconsiderate and disrespectful are judgments. And option B gets the situation and the behaviors right, but there's no impact statement. For those reasons, option C is the most effective feedback statement. Now you'll watch a video to see what it looks like and sounds like when the manager delivers this SBI statement to her direct report. As you listen to the manager, pay attention to her tone of voice, and you'll notice that her tone is calm and neutral. She does not communicate frustration or judgment through her tone.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, hey, how are you? Good?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah.
Say, thanks for getting on a call again today.
Yeah, no problem. What's going on? How are you? Good?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Listen, I wanted to have a talk about our conversation this morning.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So this morning during our call, you joined the call late, you didn't come prepared, you were typing throughout the conversation, and you were asking questions that I had already answered several times. And honestly, what you did really made me feel frustrated. It made me feel like you were wasting my time, and it really made me question whether I can rely on you to get the work done that we agreed to.
Giving an SBI statement is the start of a feedback conversation. It's not the whole conversation. The next thing you have to do is set expectations about what the person should do with your feedback. and agree on actions the person will take to meet those expectations. Setting expectations and coming up with an action plan helps you hold the person accountable for his or her behavior. Let's look at 2 approaches you can use to get people to act upon your feedback. Take a minute to read about option 1. Then I'll talk about the benefits to using this approach. Taking a collaborative approach has many benefits. In particular, it gives your team member an opportunity to take ownership over their behavior and ownership over the process of managing their behavior. It also allows you to assess a person's willingness to change their behavior. If you ask a team member to brainstorm strategies and they don't engage in the process, this may indicate a lack of interest or will on their part. In addition, a collaborative approach means you have 2 people coming up with ideas rather than just you, which could lead to better and more creative options. And finally, a collaborative approach gives you the opportunity to build trust and rapport with your team members. Now you'll watch a video to see how a manager uses option 1 to discuss her expectations. This part of the conversation happens after the manager makes an SBI statement. First, the manager says, "Yesterday, during our weekly supervision call, you joined the call late, didn't come prepared, typed throughout our conversation, and asked questions that I had already answered several times. What you did made me feel frustrated because I felt you were wasting my time, and it made me question whether I can rely on you to complete your tasks." Next, she states her expectations and brainstorms with her staff member about how to meet those expectations. Watch how she does this.
So I need you to come on time and be focused during our meetings. And I also need you to be prepared, which means that you've completed the actions that we agree on each week. And I need you to bring your own agenda items to the meeting. Does what I'm expecting make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I want to ask you then, what actions can you take to meet these expectations?
Well, one thing that would be helpful is if we can start our weekly calls a little later. This would give me a time to address any urgent emails that come in during the night. Also, I'm not feeling the pressure to respond during our calls. Is that possible?
Yeah, definitely. That's totally possible.
Yeah.
We could meet at 10 instead of meeting at 9. Would that work? That gives you what, an hour at least to respond to emails? Does that work?
Yeah, I think that would be super helpful.
Okay, great. So that addresses the issue of being on time, yeah? What about the issue of you coming prepared for our meetings? What steps can you take to address that?
I know this is an issue, and the problem for me is that I often get off our calls and then go straight into another meeting. Mm-hmm. And by the time that's over, I have forgotten some of the tasks we have talked about. Maybe you could email me a list of next action after our calls. Is that okay for you?
I mean, I agree that writing things down will be helpful.
Yeah.
But I would suggest that you write those things down, not me. I think if you can start to take responsibility for writing down your next actions, it'll help you stay focused, and then you'll also have a record of that. So I suggest that you write those things down. How does that sound?
Yeah, I can do that, and I can also email you my agenda items the day before our calls so that I'm prepared.
Perfect. And I would suggest that you put a weekly reminder on your calendar to send me your agenda items so you don't forget.
Yeah, okay, I will do that.
Okay, perfect. So the one last thing I want to suggest is that you close all the other programs on your computer when we're talking so that you're not distracted by other things.
Honestly, I don't think that's necessary. If we start our meetings later, I won't be directed by email because I will have at the time respond to urgent issue. That's the reason I have been typing on our calls.
Okay. All right, I'm totally willing to try that. Let's see if starting later, starting at 10, resolves the issue of being focused. So we'll try that first.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, good. So just to make sure we're on the same page, tell me what actions you're going to take to address the issues that I raised.
Okay, so we agreed that we are going to start our meetings at 10.
Yep.
And I'm going to write down my next actions after our calls. And I'm going to email me my agenda items that day before our meeting and set a calendar reminder for myself so I remember to do that.
Awesome. Yes, that's exactly it. And thank you for recapping. That's exactly what I had. And I'm really, really looking forward to our call next week and to see how things improve.
Yeah, me too. Is there anything else we need to talk about?
No, that's it.
Okay. I'm going to run to my next meeting. Talk to you next week.
Okay, talk to you next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take a minute to read about option 2. Then I'll share a few key points about this approach. As you can see, option 2 is a manager-led approach rather than a collaborative conversation. There are times when it is appropriate and necessary to tell a person what they need to do to meet your expectations. Brainstorming is not always the best approach. However, the more directive approach described in option 2 does not encourage joint ownership over solutions or build trust and rapport in the same way that a collaborative approach does. Therefore, when possible, you should use the more collaborative approach described in option 1 and reserve option 2 for situations when policies and procedures must be followed. You have tried a more collaborative approach in the past and it hasn't worked, and when a person does not know what actions to take to address your expectations. Now you'll watch a video to see how a manager uses option 2 to discuss her expectations with a direct report. And remember, this part of the conversation happens after the manager makes an SBI statement. First, the manager says, "Yesterday, during our weekly supervision call, you joined the call late, didn't come prepared, typed throughout our conversation, and asked questions that I had already answered several times. What you did made me feel frustrated because I felt you were wasting my time, and it made me question whether I can rely on you to complete your tasks." Next, she states her expectations and tells her staff member how to meet them. Watch how she does this. So I need you to come on time and be focused during our meetings. And I also need you to be prepared, which means that you've completed the actions we agree on each week, and you bring your own agenda items to our meetings. Does what I'm expecting make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And because we've had this conversation a number of times before, and the same problems continue to happen, I'm going to be more direct now, and I'm going to tell you what I need you to do to be able to be prepared, come on time, and be focused during our meetings, okay?
Yeah, makes sense, yeah.
All right. So the first thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to close all of the programs on your computer when we're talking so that you're not getting interrupted with emails and other messages. And I'm going to also ask that you take your phone and you put it on silent and you put it away, again, so that there's no distractions. Is this something that you're willing to do?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm with you, yeah.
Okay. And I'm also going to ask that you block out the 15 minutes before our weekly calls on your calendar. Like no other meetings, nothing scheduled for 15 minutes before, so that you should be able to have time to prepare yourself for our calls. Is this something that you're willing to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last thing is that I want you to write down the actions that we agree to each week and email them to me by the end of that day so that I can compare them with what I think we agreed to and we're on the same page. Is that something that you're willing to do?
Yeah, we're on the same page, I think.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So do you have any questions or any thoughts about what I need you to do?
No, I think everything, it's all clear.
Okay.
I got it, yeah.
Okay, so you've got it. So
Yeah.
do me a favor and recap for me what you're going to do moving forward.
Okay, so I'm going to close all the computer programs
Yeah.
when we are talking and silence my phone
Yeah.
and put it away. I'm also going to email you my action items after each call by the end of the day, and I'm going to block out the 15 minutes before our calls on my calendar so that I can get ready for our calls. I think that's everything, right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
And we're going to continue to check in on this and see whether you're doing this and it's improving the situation. Does that sound reasonable?
I think makes sense. But is there anything else we need to talk about now?
No, that's
Yeah?
all. That's all.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna to run to my next meeting. Talk to you next week.
Okay, perfect. Have a
Okay.
good meeting.
Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Okay, ciao.
Ciao, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Before we move on, I want to revisit the list of questions I shared at the beginning of this module that outline what you'll learn. Let's take a look at which questions we've answered and which remain. So far, we've covered the purpose of giving feedback. We've talked about when you should provide feedback, and we've talked about how to prepare for a feedback conversation using the SBI feedback model. And we've just talked about 2 different approaches you can use to get people to act upon your feedback. The questions we still have to cover are: how do you address third-party feedback? And how can you reduce the possibility that feedback will lead to a conflict? Next, we'll talk about question number 5. How do you address third-party feedback? Let's start by watching a video that describes third-party feedback.
Here's Rawan. And here's Mahmoud. And here are all the different people they work with. Rawan works in one location, and Mahmoud works in another. They rarely see each other face to face. Rawan gets a call from Hiba, who works at the same field site as Mahmoud. Hiba says, "I have some feedback to share about Mahmoud. He came in late to work 4 times in the past 2 weeks, and yesterday he didn't come in until 11 a.m. This meant that beneficiaries were left waiting for services for more than 2 hours. You need to talk to him."
Let's look at 5 strategies you can use when faced with third-party feedback. Strategy number 1, evaluate your information source. When you receive information about one of your direct reports from someone else, you need to make sure the information is accurate before you can give feedback. One way to assess accuracy is to think about who's giving you the information. Is this someone you trust? This is different than whether or not you like the person who's giving you information. The question is, do you trust that they are sharing accurate information? Consider whether the person has a personal agenda or whether they have the best interests of the team or the organization in mind. The answers to these questions will help you evaluate your source. Another way to assess the accuracy of someone's information is to corroborate the information when possible. If it's possible for you to observe the behavior yourself, do it. If it's not possible to observe the behavior, ask people who may have witnessed the behavior to describe what they saw. You will have to use your judgment about whether you ask people directly to describe the behavior or whether you ask more general questions. You can also talk to your direct report to corroborate information. If you hear about something your direct report did, you can ask the person about it. For example, if someone tells you that your direct report is unprepared when he facilitates the weekly staff meetings, you could ask him, "How are you doing leading the weekly staff meetings?" Notice that I did not say, "I heard that you're unprepared." Instead, I'm asking an open-ended question. It's possible your direct report will respond by telling you he feels unprepared. If that happens, he has just corroborated the information, and you can begin a feedback conversation. If he says everything is going great with the meetings, then you should seek more information from other sources to understand whether the third-party information is accurate or not. Strategy number 3, Beware of judgment being presented as feedback. If someone comes to you and says, "I have some feedback about your direct report. He's really disrespectful and no one wants to work with him." This is a judgment. It's not feedback. People constantly say they have feedback when in fact, what they're giving you is a judgment. It's your job to hear the difference. And when you do, you use strategy number 4. Ask clarifying questions to ensure the third party can describe the situation, behavior, and impact. It's your job to say to someone, "When you say my direct report is disrespectful, what do you mean? Specifically, what does he say and do?" Keep asking for specific examples until you know the situation, the behaviors, and the impact. If someone cannot give you those things, you should explain to them that without that, you are unable to act on their information. Instruct them to gather more information and bring it back to you. If you feel confident that the information you received from a third party is accurate, and you know the situation, behavior, and impact, then use strategy number 5. Deliver the feedback the same way that you would if you had observed the person's behavior yourself. For example, imagine that I'm Rowan, the manager in the video you just watched. Here is what I would say to Mahmoud, my direct report. "Mahmoud, I understand that you came in late to work 4 times in the past 2 weeks, and yesterday you didn't come in until 11 a.m. As a result, beneficiaries were left waiting for services for more than 2 hours. IRC has a clear policy that we begin work at 8:30, and I need you to arrive on time every day. I'd like to discuss strategies to resolve the issue of you being late." If Mahmoud responded by saying that I wasn't there and that someone was lying about him, I would say that although I didn't see him come in late, I believe that it happened and it needs to be addressed. This is an appropriate response when you are confident that the information you have is accurate. And if Mahmoud demanded to know who told on him, I would explain that what's important is that I believe the information and he needs to focus on changing his behavior. This is called redirecting. My goal is to focus the conversation on the behavior and how to change that behavior. One of the main reasons managers avoid giving feedback is because they're afraid that their direct reports will get upset and that a feedback conversation will lead to conflict. Managers constantly ask, "What do I do when someone gets upset because of my feedback? How should I react?" Unfortunately, managers often fail to ask, "What am I doing to cause this negative reaction? What can I do better? How can I reduce the potential for conflict when I give feedback?" The strategies we've introduced in this training help you answer those questions. Let's revisit 4 strategies we've discussed so far, which will help you reduce the possibility that your feedback will lead to a conflict. Then we'll add on a few more. Strategy 1. Plan what you will say using the SBI model. One of the main reasons feedback conversations fail is because managers fail to prepare, and they fail to describe the behavior and impact using objective, non-judgmental language. Preparation and objectivity will help you facilitate a productive feedback conversation. Strategy 2. Focus on behavior and avoid making judgments. We've talked a lot about this point, and I want to emphasize here that judgment can be expressed in words and in your tone. So in addition to using SBI to ensure that you're focusing on behaviors, you must also control your tone of voice and facial expressions to ensure that you are delivering your feedback using a calm, neutral voice and expression. If that's not possible, you should wait to give the feedback. Strategies 3 and 4 are related. Clearly state what you expect the person to do with your feedback, and discuss the actions the person should take to meet your expectations. Another reason feedback conversations can lead to conflict is because managers fail to set expectations about the change they want to see, or they assume that the direct report will know how to fix the problem. When expectations are not set, and a manager fails to discuss the action steps a person needs to take to correct poor performance, bad behavior persists. When that happens, managers often blame their direct reports for not fixing the behavior, and direct reports claim that they didn't know what the manager wanted them to do, or didn't know how to do it. To avoid this confusion, set clear expectations and check with your direct report to make sure you have a shared understanding of what those expectations are. Be sure your direct report has a clear set of action steps to follow to meet your expectations. Let's take a look at 5 final strategies to reduce conflict when giving feedback. Provide positive and critical feedback on a regular basis. When you do this, you make feedback a normal, everyday part of your interactions with staff, which reduces people's anxiety about receiving feedback and makes them more open to feedback conversations. Choose the right time to provide feedback. Consider how much time you let pass between when someone does something and when you give them feedback. There's no magic number that tells you how much time can pass before you should give feedback, but if you wait too long to give feedback, you could be allowing bad behavior to persist, or you could be missing an opportunity to show appreciation for work well done. When considering what the right time is, you should also be sure not to have a feedback conversation when someone is already upset or when you are upset. Engage in a dialogue. Don't deliver a monologue. Nobody likes to be talked at. Be sure to make the feedback discussion a conversation. When possible, invite the person to share their thoughts, and if possible, invite them to brainstorm strategies to address the feedback you shared. Role play the feedback conversation with a peer. This is a great strategy to help you feel confident to have a feedback conversation, particularly when you're concerned that your direct report might react poorly to your feedback. Lastly, emphasize the connection between growth and feedback. When you see that someone is becoming upset during a feedback conversation, it can be helpful to remind them that you are invested in their growth and development, and feedback, both positive and critical, is one way you are investing in building the capacity of your staff. Congratulations! You've arrived at the last section of the module, and it's time to revisit the key points we've discussed. Take a few minutes to read these points. Then, find an opportunity this week to give a team member positive or critical feedback and challenge yourself to use the strategies and tools you've learned in this module. Practice is the most effective way to build your feedback skills. The more you practice, the easier it will become, and the more impact you'll have on your team.